Member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, after 9 years, these NDP Liberals aren't worth the misery. Every month in Ontario, 750,000 people must rely on food banks to get by. That's up nearly 10% over last year.
Shameful.
Worse, monthly visits by Ontario's children are up almost 117% since 2019. Despite these record numbers of children relying on these food banks, the NDP Liberals continued to increase the carbon tax by 23%, on the way to actually quadrupling it, making groceries even more expensive. How many more families must suffer before the Prime Minister calls an election?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have been facing challenges in these expensive times, and that's exactly why we've been delivering programs to help them. Our $10 a day childcare program, Mr. Speaker, is saving families thousands of dollars each and every year. The National School Food Program, Mr. Speaker, which will see 400,000 additional kids receive food at school. The Conservatives would like to make you think they are pro-family, but we know that they will cut these programs at the first possible opportunity.
The Honourable Member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, after 9 years, Indigenous peoples and families living in rural and remote Ontario know the NDP Liberals aren't worth the cost. The impact of the carbon tax on the cost of groceries is a real issue for those trying to make ends meet and feed their families. Hunger Count 2024 reports there are over 2 million visits to food banks across Canada in March of last year. That's up 90% since 2019. When will the Prime Minister stop ignoring the evidence, admit their carbon tax scheme isn't working, and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For a moment, I thought my official critic was going to ask a question about Indigenous peoples, but again, we saw a return to their talking points, not the kinds of things that matter to the First Nations people that I've been working so hard with, along with my colleagues. In fact, that member voted against Indigenous health care, Grassy Narrows care home, emergency management support, schools, roads, housing, water. You get the picture, Mr. Speaker. They're no friends to Indigenous people.
The Honourable Member from Coastal Bay Central, Notre Dame.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. Yesterday, Food Banks Canada reported that the need for food banks is spiralling out of control, with 2 million Canadians per month depending on them. Demand at Bridges to Hope Food Bank in St. John's is expected to surge 30% compared to 2023. Despite record-smashing food bank usage, the NDP Liberals increased the cost of groceries by raising the carbon tax 23%. Mr. Speaker, instead of quadrupling the carbon tax, will they axe the tax so that people can afford to eat?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, what they would axe in a place like Newfoundland, remember, the Conservative leader said the dental care program didn't exist. Right? Said it's not going to work, not going to happen. Newfoundland now happens to be one of the leading places in the country for people getting care. And on average, it's saving them $730. Do you know that what it's going to save our emergency rooms and creating space? About $1.8 billion, the opportunity to serve emergency rooms. Imagine those savings. That's what they're going to cut. So when they look vulnerable people in the eye, tell them the truth. Tell them what you're going to do. You're going to take away their dental care. You're going to make sure they don't get the diabetes medication they need, and that's going to cost them big money, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition